Welcome everybody to the Mission Historical Museum. My name is Charlotte Underwood. I am the museum assistant here. Just a couple reminders, we are open every Tuesday to Friday from 1 to 4, and we are open every second Saturday of the month from 10 to 1. And so I'd just like to thank you guys for coming to our final installment of our lecture series with Matt Fouchek, and he's going to teach you a little bit about his family. So thank you so much, Matt, for coming.
Thank you, Charlotte.
I'm ready when you are.
All right, great.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Mission Museum. It's been interesting learning more about my mom's side of the family. I guess it kind of all started, back in the day, my mom would mention about, her grandmother named Mission. I was like, all right, Mom, whatever. I never thought anything of it. I thought, I don't know, you kind of focused in your own little world growing up. But there's always different stories that kind of were passed down from my mom or her brothers and sisters to hearing random things like her mother and the family had to hide on the house from Pancho Villa's raids back in the teens, I suppose. But I've kind of researched both sides of the stories here also, and there's a lot to still uncover and learning a lot about. Just a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in McAllen. I was born in 1981, and I went to Our Lady of Sorrows Catholic School for junior high, 6th through 8th grade, then McAllen High School, and graduated in 99. Went on to study civil engineering, started off at the University of Texas in Austin, and then finished government and business degree. I graduated in 2005, and while I was up in Austin, I ended up, playing some golf with a friend from Oklahoma, a roommate, and another friend from McAllen, and kind of caught that bug, I suppose, and worked at Golfsmith. And then after college, I was able to backpack around Europe, saved up some, put some on a credit card, and got a job when I came back. While planning that trip, we were at my parents' house in Austin. They had retired up there in 2004. And I guess I remember my mom mentioning when she first moved up, she's writing Christmas cards to family and friends down in the valley, or that they just retired up to Austin, be by my brother and his family, and myself and my sister were living up there also. And she said, it might snow up here. And well, it didn't snow up there. It snowed the first time in McAllen in 80 years. And that's actually mentioned in Olivia Catherine Massey-Volz's memoirs from 1898 to 1993, so this was really helpful along the way, grabbing that this past year. But while at that kitchen table, we were talking about my trip to Europe, and I checked with my mom's oldest brother's son, Robert Doffing, who lives in Houston, and kind of got a little strategy on how to travel Europe, I suppose. And my brother's like, well, you might only be over there once, so I was like, I think I can make it to St. Andrews, Scotland, the home of golf. They had the big British Open golf tournament going on. And so I actually got a chance to make it over there on Saturday afternoon and then Sunday. And it's a really neat story in itself. And kind of been writing a book on some of those stories right before COVID, and continued since I moved back just over 2 years ago. I suppose while I was going to Europe also, I was kind of interested in my dad's side of the family and my mom's side of the family, and thinking, I knew my mom's side of the family was between France and Germany, that Alsace-Lorraine area, and my dad's side was from Czech Republic. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll be able to travel to some of those places, but I probably really need to do a lot more research before that. So I didn't quite really touch those places, but I got a feel for Europe. I did a 35-day backpacking trip around with the Eurorail. I guess from there, came back and got a job in banking. Or actually, the day after the 05 Open in St. Andrews, I somehow got to carry a golf bag for the ABC crew who did the coverage all week. And that was kind of really neat experience. Wrote a thank you note, and after coming back to Austin, I worked in banking for a year and then went back and caddied in Scotland for 6 months. And over there, it was the library was quite a resource over there. That's kind of when I started really getting to more libraries more so. So while caddying and living in St. Andrews, I really got a chance to feel a different culture. And even though they speak English, it's also kind of a different, almost a mumble to, it's kind of hard to understand to like the first week or so is kind of difficult to communicate some. I think that's maybe where I learned a little more empathy to just, we take a lot of stuff for granted over here, such as the place I lived, I rented from another caddy friend, and he had a small washing machine and no dryer. So we actually had to put the clothes on the radiator to dry or clothesline outside. Had to hand wash all the dishes, which is actually pretty easy. It's almost more efficient, I think. And there were, we walked everywhere also, which, growing up, everything was about 5-10 minutes away, like driving somewhere in the 80s, 90s. And so I guess from Scotland on, I moved back to Austin full-time, and I got the chance to caddy at Augusta National in Georgia, which they have the Masters golf tournament going on this week. So I got really kind of into the golf industry for a handful of years, got to caddy on the Lazy European Tour also. So got to experience different women golfers, different cultures. From there, I moved back to Austin full-time in 2010 and got into real estate, commercial real estate and property management, and had been doing that a little over 10 years. Moved back to McAllen, or actually moved down to Port Isabel, South Padre into 2022 to research a project I'd like to do down that way, kind of an eco-friendly mixed-use development. Still kind of in the works, hopefully. And then I was visiting here in McAllen, maybe my sister, she just moved back the year or so prior. She's like, I'm never moving back to the Valley. And I actually could always see myself moving back to the Valley. And when my parents moved away in 2004, I was kind of, I don't know if I was angry or sad, or I knew I wouldn't be coming back as often. But I ended up finding a house for rent right by the one my mom grew up in McAllen. And I thought, well, maybe I could work between McAllen and Austin. And I've just really enjoyed being back in the Valley. From, I guess, the first year I was back, I kind of would go to the different museums and join the McAllen Museum, and even did the member gallery, like paintings and artwork. So I'll show you a piece I did at the end of the presentation here. And I guess it kind of runs in the family, some of the green thumbs in farming, to plants, to art, to just I really appreciate what all the Valley has to offer, and people who've come before us. I'd like to just touch on a few other couple stories. I know about 5 years ago, or maybe 6 years ago now, my mom and I and my two of her brothers, my Uncle Tom Doffing and Richard Doffing, were here for my Aunt Mary Beamsley's husband, Jerry Beamsley's funeral. And we came to the Mission Museum. And it wasn't as nice as it is today. They've really put in a lot of work over here, and it's really impressive. I've been coming over here and bothering them from time to time, or researching upstairs, and some of my mom's side of the family. I suppose I found different. Well, while I was driving my mom and two uncles around, we were kind of going around different parts of McAllen, and they were talking. Oh, this was the first pizza place, and I was like, first pizza place? Like, you didn't have pizza like the whole time? It's like maybe in the early 50s, my Uncle Tom said, and this was on the corner of Business 83 and the northeast corner of Business 83 and 10th Street. Which was maybe later Faulkner's drugstore. And actually, I think that same location has another story. There's quite a few that I've kind of picked up here and there. But I know while driving my aunt, my mom and uncles around, it kind of got me thinking a bit more about some of the history down here. I was still living in Austin. But I guess from there, 2019 to, let's see, like, I know 2021, my Uncle Tom and I guess I'd maybe started researching or heard a story about my mom's uncle, L.W. Kemp, who was my mom's mother, Iris's older sister, Violet, was married to Lewis, and they lived in Houston. Well, he helped out with the centennial celebration of Texas in 1936. He worked for a paving company, which is, I think, later Exxon, or it was Exxon, and he'd travel all over Texas, so he actually had a fascination with history himself. So he helped out with a lot of the historical markers around the state, to the San Jacinto Monument, he compiled a book on the centennial celebration I've got here also today. I've loaned it to a few people since I've been back in the valley. Actually, while my Uncle Tom and I were up in Austin, I kind of inquired, I guess his collection ended up being donated to the Briscoe Library in Austin on the University of Texas campus. And during COVID, you had to pick out certain stuff online and see what looked interesting. And this particular book had a lot of interesting history items, I thought. And so while we were looking through his archive, we were looking through this book. I took a lot of photos of different stuff. And fast forward a couple of years, I'm back up in Austin visiting my folks. And I'm on North Lamar at Half Price Books. And in their rare collection is this book. And I noticed it up top. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I thought to myself, I asked him to see it, and it was $100. I was like, oh, that's kind of expensive, but I think it's well worth it. And so each of these books was sent to all the governor's offices around the state of Texas. And they got back a letterhead from each governor's office thanking them for researching or honoring their former citizens that came to Texas from, like Davy Crockett or Bowie and so forth. So that was a really neat book and experience with my Uncle Tom. I got to hear some other stuff there. So I guess moving back to the valley, I've kind of visited different museums to really, the first year I kind of checked out more of Harlingen a lot with their art walk and market days, first Saturday of the month, and really thought that was pretty neat. Checked out more of Mission to Edinburgh, Farr, Alamo. This past year I've really gone a lot more to Brownsville also, gone to their museum, free museum days. I think that was in July. Got to hear more about the history down here. I just keep learning, and I'm a big fan of history. Try and learn both the good and the bad, so without further ado, I'll get to this presentation here. So this is my mom's side of the family. This is like the Roaring Twenties here in 1925, it says. And this actually photo I noticed, this is from either my Aunt Mary or my mom's collection, but the same outfits worn here are actually, there's about 6 different photos and mentions of my mom's side of the family in the museum in the other room over. My mom's mother is Iris here, and her sisters, this might be Violet and Hyacinth on the other end, and their younger brother Arthur. This is Rose, their mother, and Charles, their father. I suppose the other photo in the museum is the 3 sisters, and they were known as the Flower Sisters here in Mission. My grandmother was the first Anglo born in Mission in 1909. The family actually has an interesting story in how they came to the valley. My grandfather Charles came in 1900 first from Exira, Iowa, I believe. Well, yeah, Indiana. They were from Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, that area. To he came in 1900, and I suppose he came. Let me back up one second. Charles was 25 years old and not married at the time, and I suppose it was a new area and irrigation down here to the family. And he ends up going back and telling the family about the area down here and the opportunity, I suppose. They were going to first try and grow rice. And rice really didn't grow down here. I think it was one of the things the government was trying to push, rice and sugarcane at the time. He goes back and marries my great-grandmother Rose in 1903. She's from Cincinnati, Ohio. And they bring the whole family down, which is kind of a interesting story in that let me fast forward here one. But here's an article from 1972 in the Mission Times. And this is, I suppose, my great-grandmother Rose kind of talking about some of this, because there's another article that I have about some more of this. But it mentions about Mr. Volz came to Brownsville from Indiana in 1902. And I think I've seen in some of the family stuff that was crossed out and said 1900. And it says the following year, 1903, he returned north after me. So they were married in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I was raised, and then started on our honeymoon trip to Texas by train. Arriving in Galveston, we embarked on the steamer called the Manateo, which ran from Galveston to Point Isabel about once a month. Leaving Galveston Friday at noon, we reached Point Isabel Monday afternoon. The boat was anchored in the Gulf, for the water was very rough, and we were forced to remain on board until Tuesday afternoon. So it was quite a journey to get down here. Then a small sailing vessel was sent to take us ashore. It was quite a task to go from the steamer to the small boat on a rope ladder, for I'd never tried to climb down one before, and I was very seasick. We were very glad to get to shore in the little train which ran the narrow gauge tracks from Point Isabel to Brownsville daily. This train consisted of an engine and two coaches. After traveling for an hour or so, the train suddenly stopped. When we asked why it stopped, we were informed that the train had run out of wood and that we had to wait until some trees could be chopped in order to get enough for the train to get to Brownsville. So it was getting dark, and the coaches were without light most of the time for the conductor, but we had one lantern, and we carried this with them wherever he went. We finally reached Brownsville late that night. And then it mentions about the Mexican people are most romantic. Upon learning that I was a bride, serenaders came every night for over a month to play and sing their lovely Mexican songs under our window. This is a really neat article because it also mentions about, I think it's in here, mentions about they would get their milk from goats. I guess a person would come by with goats. You can almost, I think I see that right here, milked at our doorsteps. So they were in Brownsville in 1903. They lived off off Levy Street and farmed about 9 miles northwest at Olmito. They stayed a couple years and then came to Mission actually in 1905. That was, the railroad came this way and there's new land opportunities. I've come to try and figure out the valley as an adult and how we've kind of, I keep learning different things about how the valleys come around, but without the irrigation, the farming, we wouldn't be here today. I think it was kind of a pretty rough area with cactus and mesquite trees and whatnot. Well, let's see, moving on. Here's the family. Well, the family, when they first came to Mission, they lived in an adobe house. And then they built a house later on, which I believe might be this one. This is photos from 1912, and this is Charles's parents, and his actually dad was only supposed to live another 6 months when they got down to Brownsville. He had asthma, but I think there's another condition also. He ended up living another 20 years with the subtropical climate down here and the agriculture. This is some of Charles's his brother Richard Lee or Frederick and Albert Herman, and so they were a family of I believe 8 siblings. So Charles was 25 when he moved down first. He was born in 1875, and I guess he was 28 years old when he got married to. He was the eldest of the Voltzes and kind of the pioneer. His youngest brother, Alphonse, his wife wrote her memoir, and that was really helpful because it mentioned all kinds of stories about them also, as well as her family and coming down. So it's kind of interesting from 1912, like some of the clothing they're wearing, to fast forward a couple of years to 1915, and here's Charles with his young family, and probably wearing their Sunday's best in front of the house, and it's kind of gotten a lot more lush, and there's a date palm tree here, which I think was kind of an early crop, and the sisters were all kind of photographed in front of that. And then this is his parents, and they kind of from Indiana, and him and his wife in front of that house and that date palm also. And then here's the Voltz brothers and some of the family. They were, one thing from researching, I really noticed that family was a big thing back then, and also their religion, their church. They started off with the Guadalupe Church and went on to St. Paul's Church. There's different stories of, I guess, Christmas Eve. They would all go over to Charles and Rose's house for Christmas Eve dinner. And then kind of coming back, or in that same era, in 1909, when they're living in Mission, the youngest Alphonse, also known as Al, and his brother Richard, they attended the La Lamito School in 1909, and there's accounts talking about Al driving a 2-wheeled wagon to school. In this photo, in this book, it shows like a regular wagon, 1909. At age 13, he's driving himself. They moved kind of up the canal from just north of Madero, near the La Lamito Mission, up to the southeast corner of the Conway and the Expressway. They had 80 acres there, where they had 15 acres where the house was, and maybe different crops, but mainly grapefruit. Here, I just wanted to point out, I thought it was interesting, I joined a few of the local groups on Facebook also, like McAllen Today and Yesterday, and the Valley Remember When, and a few others, Magic Valley. And here, I guess, I asked if anyone knew of some of these schoolmates, and they chimed in about Cleo Dawson, and she wrote the book She Came to the Valley in the 40s, and then a movie was made in 1979. And I guess there's also Charles Langston, and he kind of, I guess they contacted him and had a phone interview about what he remembered, and he remembered Al kind of riding a 2-wheel wagon to school. It was only maybe a few miles away, if that. Their house was half a mile south of Mission, there on Conway. But I believe Cleo Dawson's sister, Carrie Dawson, reason why the 1920s written down there is the year she passed away from childhood disease, or it may have been measles? Tuberculosis, thank you, yeah. And then here's Richard Lee in 1915 working, and Al at 16, he's a sophomore at Mission High School, 1912. So 3 years later, he's over here. And this was kind of an interesting photo here in the museum. I couldn't quite get a great photo of it. It's a little angled in the glass case, but it's Charles Volz, and he's in the field with Conway, and he's got celery, and it says it's yields 410 crates at an average of 95 pounds, or 1 acre yields 410 crates. It grossed almost $2,000, and net profit was just over $1,025. And I know from looking at numbers from yesterday to today, for instance, like a grapefruit back then was like 25 cents a grapefruit, which equaled to about $3.67 a grapefruit. And so I think my cousin and I, we kind of calculated a while back. It was pretty substantial for a box of grapefruit. You know, it's kind of a rare commodity, or kind of a new thing within the U.S. So and then here's actually maybe an earlier photo of Charles on his horse, and this is an onion field, and in the background you can see the city of Mission and the onion crates. These are kind of remains of onions down here. So 1940 Mission Times talking about the grapefruit, and from what I've kind of read and researched, it took him about 2 years to kind of develop the grapefruit. They were having issues with citrus down here as far as disease, and so he actually is credited with splicing a sour root with the citrus root to get it to grow. But it took him about, well, over here in the museum it also kind of tells about it took about 10 years to kind of really develop the grapefruit. Which I think is kind of interesting with this graph down here. I kind of, in the McAllen library, found this information about Texas citrus industry, and it kind of gives you the yields of grapefruit and oranges over the years. And you can see, like in 1920, it's pretty, minimum, and then it kind of by 1930 or the mid-20s, it really kind of spikes, and then a little drop. And some of those dips are due to either freezes or the introduction of a new grapefruit strand. For instance, in 1950, they kind of did away with the white grapefruit, and then maybe 52 was a freeze, and so forth. But Charles actually passed away in 1946, and so he was on the first boom of grapefruit, it looks like. But from what I've researched, 1933 to 1950 was really the height of the grapefruit. I know I've seen it here in the museum, a box of grapefruit being sent to the President of the United States, and letterhead thanking them for the citrus. So that's kind of a lot about and the Volzes. It's been interesting to see about my grandmother Iris. I guess I kind of was really getting into this because I wanted to learn more about her, because I didn't really know my grandmother very well, or my grandfather Louis Anthony. He passed away when my mom was 19 in 1968, I believe, or 69. But last May we had a family reunion on my mom's side, and so I got to ask all kinds of questions to my aunts and uncles, and it was interesting to hear more about that side of the family and Iris, and so moving on to some of the Dolphins. Nick Dolphin was, I believe, my mom's uncle, and kind of had this brochure about the Nick Dolphin Company, their owners and developers, just north side of Mission, 2 miles. He was kind of, I've heard a millionaire a couple times, or he made it and then lost it and then made it again, and I'm not sure how that all worked out, but it could very well be the reason why more of the Dolphins moved down from the Midwest as well. And this is my mom's father, Louis, and his older brother, Julius, and his wife, Ann Dolphin. Ann was an Eckroat, and she was quite the painter. I've kind of found all kinds of paintings around McAllen Mission that people have, and started taking photos of them. And Ann's Dolphin's Melania Davis, who's about 89 years old and still goes to St. Paul's Church, and a wealth of knowledge. And my mom and I have sat with her a few times and got to hear a couple neat other stories, and kind of gone to church over there about a month ago also, and ran into Melania and had breakfast with her and Mrs. Townsend. That was a really nice treat to be able to spend some time with them and hear some more stuff. But my mom's dad was born in 1909 in Maryville, Missouri, and he was in the produce industry also. The Dolphins lived in Alamo, and or his side of the family, and so he would maybe come work with Nick Dolphin up this way also, I believe. It's how they kind of ended up more associated with Mission, and Ann was from Mission, I believe, and that's why Julius and Ann moved to Mission and raised their family. And they're all a very creative side of the family also. My mom's cousins do all kinds of artwork to needlepoint, to have built a replica of the La Lomito Mission out of clay. To the La Lomito Mission over the years has been a really interesting thing for the family. They've gone and done picnics back in the 50s over there, my mom would tell me. So this was, I believe, in the early 30s here. I think 1932, I'm pretty sure. And this is some of Ann's artwork here. She did a lot of watercoloring, a lot of floral stuff, and then the hand trolley, the bridge in Mexico to the west. Here's some other floral, and this was for her funeral. And this sketch and kind of on the inside talked about her her service. This is also my mom's mother, Iris Volz. It's actually signed also Iris Volz before she was married. There's a few other paintings and other artwork that she's done that I didn't get a chance to put in the presentation, but I think some of the green thumbs and the art kind of came down the family lineage. Here's some of the Dolphin families from 1931 here, and here's my grandfather here, and here's Julius, Ann's husband. And then the photo to the right is Iris with her 2 eldest kids, my Uncle Bill and my Uncle Johnny. It's probably when they were living in Alamo. And that bench is actually still in the family. And I think it came from that Alsace-Lorraine area in France, Germany. These are some of the older kids. My Uncle Bill was born 1937 and Johnny 1938. Here's my uncle, or my grandfather Lewis also, with Bill and Johnny. And then the photo to the right is my mom in the middle, maybe about 8 years old or so. So this must have been like 1957, around mid-50s. So my mom was the youngest out of 7, and so there's the older kids and the younger kids. And they actually, the family moved from Alamo to McAllen in 1949 and went to Our Lady of Sorrows Catholic Church. They would always go back to Mission Sunday after church and visit Julius and Ann and their family. And it was kind of interesting to hear that they didn't have AC back in the day. That Julius and Ann's house had ceiling fans, and it just kind of struck me kind of odd that they didn't have AC. Well, there's a lot of interesting things within the last 100 years. You know, you think 100 years is a long time ago, but it's really not that long ago if you think about it in the grand scale of time. Such as like Al and Olivia's house in Mission, they didn't have electricity until 1937. They had kerosene lanterns and cast iron stove with 2 burners. Whenever all their kids were born at the house in the 30s until their last child in 1937 also was born at the McAllen Hospital. And there happened to be a Dolphing who was the nurse, Josephine Dolphing. But they, whenever the wife was pregnant, I come to find out also, like, you know, it was kind of hot during the summer, so they would sometimes be on the screened-in porch with a bed, or if you were elderly, you'd also be on the screened-in porch because we had the nice breeze in the evenings or in the mornings to cool off. They'd have an ice box also, or they would sometimes take trips up to San Antonio or Kerrville or Uvalde, where there's maybe some rivers or lakes to get in and visit other friends. Sometimes they'd take the train up to San Antonio. And this is my grandmother Iris and my mom at 3rd grade at Our Lady of Sorrows in McAllen. And this photo actually, I hadn't seen it before, but I got it from my Aunt Mary's collection, her older sister. And my mom looks just like my sister. And my sister, when she saw that, she's like, wow, send me that photo. So there's some striking resemblances from the Dolphings and Voltzes and whatnot. And then the far right is my mom, 16 years old, McAllen High School, going to a dance. So it's kind of interesting to see the different clothes over the years also. And then here's some of my artwork that I've just kind of been getting more into. Like, I joined the Upper Valley Art League in Mission this past year. And I suppose like this first one on the right was an early attempt at like a bowl of fruit with a mid-century modern design. And so, and then this was a palm tree, and kind of tried getting a little more creative with it, a couple blackbirds and a little abstract. And then here's one of my first pieces down here that I did was McAllen Museum member gallery, and it was a finalist. So I actually collected the driftwood down at South Padre whenever I was living down there at the end of 2022 with my dog. We'd just go out on the beach a few times, and there were other bits that were found around Port Isabel, old nails to the kind of almost bubbles, this kind of copper wiring that was just flattened on the alley road, to the piece of tile on the top left is actually from the yacht club in Port Isabel, remnants of tile there. Then I just kind of, it was almost like a puzzle, and that's kind of how I found history also. You kind of just keep piecing things together. I keep learning different things and trying to figure out a little more in the perspective of their era. And I suppose Yeah, and then I've kind of, before COVID, I've written half a book here on the left, and I kind of worked on an early jacket cover design, and it's kind of about some of my golf stories over the years. I've been told I should write a book even from people who aren't golf enthusiasts. I grew up thinking it was the dumbest game ever, and kind of it's been really nice to meet a lot of people through golf. I've kind of changed that a bit, and the one on the right was idea for a second book, more about the Valley and a perspective from a high school kid. Like growing up in the Valley, for me, I only knew maybe people a few years behind and a few years ahead of me in my class, or my brothers or cousins, maybe a few of their friends. But it's kind of an early concept for that book, jacket cover. And I've come to learn, we've had all kinds of interesting people, astronauts come from the Valley, or just a movie producer who did a Twilight movie, to Tom Landry back in the day, to growing up in the 90s. It was kind of a little before my time, but the book would kind of almost try and every decade have some interesting people, from maybe Anglos to Hispanics to mixed, but it would just kind of try and cater more to the high school kid, just tell them how much interesting and impressive people have come from the Valley. And so it's been really nice moving back, and I don't know, I could always see myself moving back to the Valley, and I continue to learn, and really thankful to be back home. So thank y'all for your time, and if y'all have any questions, I can dive back into a lot more of the material.
What's the cheeseburger mean?
Oh yeah, so the Cheeseburger Project, it's the business and psychology around in of golf, and it's actually, this is Masters Week at Augusta National in Georgia. I got a chance to caddy over there, and while walking down the fairway, another caddy friend had mentioned to his golfer after he had a previous bad hole, like out of the blue, and another bad drive, like, what's your favorite cheeseburger? And the guy looks at him like he's crazy and says, the caddy goes into his spiel like, oh, I like mine with bacon and avocado and grilled onion and grilled mushroom and a fried egg and maybe some barbecue sauce. And so the guy starts thinking about it, and he's like, oh, well, I like mine like this and like that from this certain restaurant also. And so it kind of changes your mindset from maybe like it ruining his day, having a bad round in golf, like at the nicest golf course in the world, arguably, to kind of getting back, changing that prefrontal cortex. And you can do that with pizza or ice cream also, or other different little tidbits. Speaking of Augusta National, it was actually a nursery before it was Augusta National. It was a Berkman family nursery. And there's the first wisteria in the country was from there, brought over. So it was the perfect land for a golf course. Some might argue that, but it's kind of interesting to see how things develop over the years. So, any other questions?
When I think of the Bolts family, I think of the Spikes family. Wasn't Faustine Spikes?
Right.
Yes.
She was married to one of the Voltses. I've got in the book also. I've kind of...
And Dick Volts, I remember Richard Volts very...
I know my mom's... so also you had Iris's older sister, Hyacinth, was married to Melch, who was the mayor of Mission from 1960 to 67. To Arthur, the younger brother, actually was a civil engineer, 297th civil engineer license in Texas, and he lived in Laredo, married Marguerite Martin, and two of her cousins still live there in Laredo too. Another funny story, Mom, I had a friend growing up in McAllen who I played a lot of soccer with and other sports, Dirk Martin, and they're chiropractors, and he was going to set me up with a girl, Nancy Revis, in high school, and we were both athletic, I guess, and him and his mom thought we'd make a good match, and or go out on a date possibly. But my mom's like, who? And she's like, no, that's actually a cousin of yours. You can't. So my mom had a lot of cousins growing up down here. To some of the Voltzes also lived in Mercedes. To Edinburgh. To I know there's Nick Dolphing who lived in, I think, Brownsville. He was a golf professional down that way. To one of the early soil samples from the valley that was tested in D.C. and said we had great soil down here was from a dolphin property near Santa Ana Wildlife Refuge. There's a dolphin road over there, over by the Schuster's Farms and Rio Fresh over that way. But that might have been from the other dolphins. So it's interesting. My mom mentioned that growing up, going to Our Lady of Sorrows Catholic school, there's also another dolphin family with similar names, and they weren't related though, but they may have been related way back in that Germany, France area. And so, yeah, it's kind of a unique name, or some unique names that you don't hear too often. Do you have a question, sir?
I was going to just inquire about Dolphin Road, when it was named, or I'm sure it was to recognize as a pioneer, but
Is that the one in Mission, north of here?
yeah.
So I think that was after Nick Dolphing, and he had Golden Groves. And so he's got, I'll let you check this out or look at this if you like. It talks about the marketing for 1928 and working with the Chamber of Commerce also. To in the back it says more about Nick Dolphing, and I know this article actually came from another book from 1931. It says about, and the museum here also has this book, the Lower Rio Grande Valley of Texas and its Builders. And so it talks about Nick Dolphing in here, and talks about Charles and Rose Voltz. Talks about all kinds of interesting people that really tell you about the first part of the first half of the century of mission, or the first 30 years, I guess. Yeah, I need to research some more on some of
I
that.
think you should tell them about when you were over there and the new RNA.
Oh, so going back to, I guess, this book here, my mom was asking about a story. So I guess I was living in caddying in 2006 over here in the summer. For about 6 months I lived over there, and towards the end of the season they have an event, the Royal and Ancient Golf Club, which governs the golf for the rest of the world except for the U.S. and Canada, which the USGA does. They have a captain's driving-in ceremony, so the new captain's elected ambassador for the game of golf, and he has an event where there's several hundred people in front of the clubhouse, and he hits a golf ball at 9 o'clock in the morning. Cannon goes off from this old ship, and you have all these caddies, about 20, 30 in the fairway, trying to retrieve his ball and bring it back to him. Whomever actually brings that golf ball back gets a gold sovereign coin, and there's the different local papers take photos, and I actually was the first American to be able to do that. It had been going on over 100 years, and I actually dreamt it the night before. And from then, I actually told my friend how to do it, my strategy, and he actually got it twice a few years later, and it was in his book, An American Caddy in St. Andrews by Oliver Horvitz. So, yeah, it's just kind of like in this book, I also have a story about walking down Amen Corner with Arnold Palmer and asking him about his Scottish caddy, who is really beloved and well known over that way too. Just different unique stories and experiences.
Did your subtitle say your family named the city of Mission?
So yeah, so there's also an article talking about Rose and Charles and Hoyt and Conway in the front yard. I think it was the Volts house farm. And Rose suggested the name Mission after the La Lomito Mission. There was already a Mission City, Texas, so instead of Mission City, that's why it was named Mission. Yes?
Did Volts have a connection with Sherry? The
Uh,
business connection, or?
That's a good question. I know Sherry came a little later, so I imagine so because they were doing truck. Sherry helped really market the valley more so. I know this is the Sherry office building here, and I've got to go through some old leases and see how the Voltses moved up along the canal to where they farmed or their house, and they actually hosted William Jennings Bryan at that house also, and other excursion parties. It was so that's a good question. I'm sure it was a small town, so everyone knew everyone. I think that's how, or the different churches, from the different cities, they kind of would do different functions together, and that's how you meet other potential dates or or get married to someone. Yeah. So. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it.